Warning, you are about to hear truth and facts about trauma and mental health today and so much more. We'll discuss the mindset of predators and criminals right here on The Warriors. I want to tell everybody, buckle up. Because you know what? Dr. Bethany Marshall is a well-known national expert, a psychoanalyst, a marriage and family therapist. She's based in California. And Dr. Marshall is the author. She has so many credits to her name of the book, Deal Breakers, When to Work on a Relationship and When to Walk Away. And Dr. Bethany is an in-demand, I am telling you, guest on every radio, television, every media platform they want her. And now we have her on The Warriors. So I am completely honored. And I do want to give a shout out to Nancy Grace, because this is where I first met Dr. Bethany and encountered her. And I'm like, I have to talk to this Dr. Bethany more. We don't have a chance to really chit chat a little bit, and I got to get her on The Warriors. So here she is today. And all I know is I always say to myself when I'm listening to Dr. Bethany, I agree. I want to hear more about that. So a great big shout out to Nancy Grace. Please follow Dr. Bethany. Go to her website, drbethanymarshall.com. She's on X, Facebook, Instagram. She also has a YouTube channel, but don't worry, everybody. I'm putting all of the information in the body of the video, and you will go there. You will study up. You will follow Dr. Bethany, but not now, after you watch all of this. Dr. Bethany, I'm so excited. Let's get to it. Welcome, Dr. Bethany Marshall, to The Warriors.
Thanks, Lynn. It's so great to be here. I love seeing you on Nancy Grace because you're so passionate about helping victims of abuse. And I feel like I'm always spouting facts, and you're really feeling the emotions of the survivors and carrying that emotions. And it's a really good note on that show, because it's easy to get disconnected because you're on air and not, you're trying to produce the perfect show, but you carry the feelings for the show. And it's really a great addition.
Oh, thank you for saying that, because I always watch you and I'm like, oh, Dr. Bethany is so calm, so scholarly. And I'm always, but I guess maybe that's a good mix. I think that's a good mix. But thank you for saying that. And also thank you for the work you do. You're always willing to share your voice and expertise. And especially, I think, Dr. Bethany, in today's environment, it is so necessary we talk about issues. Before we get going, I want to ask you a couple of things. I'm going to digress a little bit.
Okay.
Is it true? Now, this is buckle up. Now, sit down. I think you're sitting down already, but sit down again. Is it true? I recently saw an SNL skit. I believe it was you in the skit with Nancy Grace. True or false?
True. That was me in the skit.
Well, you know what? I love it. I loved it, and I just thought it was fun. I don't know how you feel about it, or Nancy, but I thought, you know what? If they're going to recognize you, I think it's a good thing.
If you make it onto SNL, you've made it, right? It doesn't matter if they make you look kind of silly. At least it's that there's no such thing as bad press, right?
Well, most of the time.
But most of the time.
But the show's on 50 years, and actually neighbors of mine, the studio's down the street, so it's not too far from here, but 50 years. And I remember when they started, Dr. Bethany.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
It's hard to believe I can remember when they started. That's the hard part. I was in high school. Now, let's get into something.
Okay.
Before we get serious here on The Warriors, give us a little nugget about yourself, something we don't know. It could be about growing up, anything you want to share. Spill with us, as I like to say, something about Dr. Bethany Marshall.
Well, I grew up in Central West Africa, Congo. My parents were missionaries, but not the Bible beating type, more like helping people plant better crops, digging wells, building infrastructure, because it was under a dictatorship. So I grew up in a very humanitarian environment, which I think carries over to kind of the work you're doing, like really extending oneself to other people, especially people who have not had a voice along the way.
Well, see, I didn't know that about you.
You didn't?
I didn't know about growing up in the Congo. No, I mean, at least kind of into my next question. I want to say to you, why did you want to become, a psychoanalyst, a therapist, take on people's problems? Why?
Well, a couple of things. My dad later became a pastor, and he would come home and around the dinner table, he would discuss the parishioners who had come in, and he had done pastoral counseling. And I remember listening to him thinking there just has got to be a better way. Like I respected my dad, but the the help he was able to give was so limited that really inspired me. And then I think of my clinical practice, if somebody's not doing well or they're overwhelming me, then I'm not giving good treatment. That means they need a higher level of care, like support group, hospitalization, maybe a scaffolding around their life of some sort, or medication. So I don't really feel overwhelmed because my job is to make their life not overwhelming, or as much as possible, not overwhelming.
I don't know. Dr. Bethany, that sounds tough to me in today's age. But you know what I want to ask you?
Yes.
Some current headlines. So actually, she was a neighbor of ours, unfortunately. Very sad story. Michelle Trachtenberg, the actress, age 39, who passed away a couple of days ago. She was very well known back in the 90s. As a kid actress, Harriet the Spy. My daughter loved that movie. She did Gossip Girl, which was a big deal around the country, even here in New York, where it was based. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we have that. I want to throw this at you. How should we be talking to kids, teens, even young people about something like this? It just seems to me there's a lot of death surrounding young people lately, a lot of influencers. I've been seeing a lot of headlines in the last year about that. And also, this, I'm going to just say it, this Gene Hackman, I keep hearing every 5 minutes mummification. That even scares me, and I don't get scared. I'm a warrior.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So what, it's just scary, that word. And also because the kids, and I'm lumping it, like Michelle Trachtenberg was 39, but still she lives on in videos that kids see today. Kids have phones, they see everything, right? Their friends show them. Give us some advice. How should we talk to our children and our young people? Because I'm a great believer in, we always should be open and honest and address things, age appropriate kind of thing.
Of course.
But what do you think? Because I do not believe in allowing the internet and on the playground, as we used to say, give the facts and truths out. So how should we deal with all of this?
Well, first of all, you ask them what they know about it. You always start from their frame of reference and what information they've already ingested. So that's the starting point. And then you ask what questions they have, because they will have curiosity. They'll be talking about it with their friends. And the reason you ask them is you don't want to give them more than they're curious about. Because you work with trauma victims, if you hand a trauma victim too much information, or you get them to talk about the assault or the past, they get really activated. I mean, we human beings are not meant to live in a state of trauma. Our amygdala gets activated, the fight or flight gets activated. So the same is true with children. You don't want to supply too much information or work them up about it. So just answer questions as simply and as factually as possible. Now, when they get older, like teenagers, this becomes a talkable topic for whatever issues are going on in the household. So let's say, by the way, off camera a second, how did she die? Michelle
They are
Trachtenberg?
not revealing. They're not revealing how she died. Her mother found her at 8:00 in the morning. And it's reported that she did have a liver transplant at some point. They're being very cagey about details. She was seen out in a restaurant just a couple of days before here in New York City. Reported she was looking very frail and weak and agitated. And then there are no details, no autopsy. Her parents don't want an autopsy. End of story.
So in terms of it being a talkable topic, if you're talking to a teenager, like, what anxieties do they have that you can use this story to help them with? Maybe they're anxious about dying. Maybe they don't know how sturdy their bodies are. Maybe they want to know about health. Maybe they want to know about maybe alcoholism and if that affects the liver. So I'll make it a talkable topic to talk about whatever they're interested in. So you're not orienting them towards Michelle Trachtenberg necessarily. Right. You're orienting them towards their own internal world and helping them process their feelings.
Yes, good advice. I've just noticed there's so many what they call influencers, also very young ages. We just had a young woman, 24. I noticed she died. So I know kids must, and young people, I'm always like kids, 30 and under, kids. That's what I do. You know why I say that, Dr. Bethany, is because I use that as the internet, the digital bubble. They've been born 30 and under.
That's
in
true.
This digital bubble. So I'm like,
good
kids,
point.
And that is the truth. So it's really, these things going on affecting that whole age range, basically.
Mhm.
Now, I want to get into something that
Okay.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, something we at the Warriors deal with victims of all forms of exploitation,
Mm,
sex trafficking, sexual assault, all of that, right?
mm.
Trauma. Every one
Trauma.
of them has trauma. I don't think the public really understands what the word trauma means. And I'm going to tell you, Dr. Bethany, I have more people. We do a lot of focus groups and speeches and
Mm.
things. They'll say to me a lot, and I'm not judging anybody, but the public will say to me, I don't understand. Why doesn't this woman just run away? They do not understand
Ah,
what trauma is or trauma bonds or any of that. So give us a little tutorial about trauma.
well, I think of trauma as a sudden, unexpected intrusion into one's life that was previously outside of awareness. Maybe you get picked up by a sex trafficker, maybe you get assaulted, but there's a suddenness to it, so you're unprepared. And because of that, the amygdala, which is the fight or flight part of the brain, becomes completely activated. And then there's a sense of confusion between self and other. Like, am I causing this to happen? Is the other person causing this to happen? Another definition I heard once was that trauma is a happening for which there is no prior learning. We learn to walk, we learn to eat, we learn to
Yeah.
tie our shoes. No one teaches us what it's like to be predated upon or completely assaulted. Our parents might warn us about it, but there's no implicit learning about this. So we're completely ill-equipped. What happens with the brain with trauma is that as a part of our survival mechanism, we will expect that trauma to happen again and again. So think about our ancestors. Let's see if you were predated upon by a bear and you were in the woods and a bear attacked you, but you got away. Now, your brain is going to keep sending signals that there's a bear out there. So that past trauma and anticipating it will keep you alive. That's what happened evolutionarily. So what happens now with trauma survivors is, let's say they were raped when they were 6 years old, and then they start to date. Somebody shows sexual interest in them, and all of a sudden they feel they're being assaulted again. That's the predictive brain telling them that the trauma is right around the corner. So one of the things I do with trauma victims that's so important is to remind them of the differences between past and present. I think for Lynn's warriors, I would imagine part of the work is helping them to protect themselves and to be aware and know the warning signs and help give them resources and extricate them from bad situations. In my field, we take another stance, which is that if somebody's feeling really traumatized and they're not in a dangerous situation, we help point out the differences between past and present because their brain needs to encode new memories and experiences in order to override the past trauma. So a very quick example, if you don't mind, is a patient who was, she had a horrible childhood. She thinks her uncle was actually her father. Her mother was the town prostitute. The mother would have her younger siblings engage sexually while my patient was watching. She had to dig trash out of a garbage can to help feed her siblings. So she came to me, she was in her 40s. And of course, she was repeatedly sexually abused. And as a part of the treatment, she found a relationship with a wonderful, wonderful guy. They got married, but she couldn't have a sexual life because every time he approached her, she imagined he was raping her. So past and present collided. The predictive brain said it's happening again. So the treatment at that point was to help her see that he was not a dangerous person, so that kind of like taping over a Memorex tape, but like that. I mean, I don't know if your audience even knows that what
Yes,
those
they
are from.
do.
So, okay,
They
so
do, or
taping
we will
over.
teach them. We'll teach them, Dr. Bethany. Yes.
So you want to tape over. So the memories are populated, maybe it's a more modern term, with new experiences and not just dominated by the old trauma.
Yeah. And we find, would you agree with this, that trauma is really lifelong? You
Oh,
know,
yes.
it's nothing that that's why I take, great offense almost to we saved somebody, we healed somebody.
Mm.
It's basically reclaiming one's life, but it's an ongoing process. Somebody can go, as 10 years, 20 years,
Mhm.
no recollection, no anything. And then, these feelings or visuals start flooding back.
That's
And
right.
I do always want to talk about these issues because I feel like so much is thrown at the public today, right?
Mm.
That they come to, for instance, the warriors, you know, after the fact. Like I'm
Mm.
always trying to have, some sort of, intervention, prevention, education, so people
Mhm.
have indicators or look for things or know, like you're available, right? You're
Mm.
available to help. There's hope. There's help out there. And that's one thing people need to know. There are people who will listen to their stories and will help them. Now, let's get to, I know it's going to be your favorite part right now. We are frequently together on crime stories with Nancy Grace.
Yes.
And we are seemingly talking about, as I call him, Dirty Diddy forever. Right. Dirty Diddy. I call him that because being in New York City, I started out in the music business years ago, but jingles and film scores and things of that. MTV, I was originally with them doing tags for MTV.
Mm.
I hope our audience will know what all that is, but we will educate you, MTV. Um, so I always heard he was referred to. Women just around town would call him Dirty Diddy.
Wow.
And
So I thought you made
that's
that
what,
up, but they would
no,
call him that. Oh,
because there's
wow.
never a
Okay.
chance to explain. And so I just automatically call him Dirty Diddy. That was his
Ah.
name. Fast forward. I probably heard that for the first time, at least back in the like early 90s. That's
Mm.
a long time ago. So I refer to
Wow.
him as that. There seems to be, Dr. Bethany, so much predation,
Mhm.
exploitation, whether it comes out of Hollywood, music business, online. Right now, I have to tell you, I'm up in arms. I don't know if you're up to speed about the Tate brothers. I'm very
I know
distraught
who
about.
they are. What's happening now with them?
Well, the Tate brothers now, we have 35 plus women, including minors, who have
Mm.
accused them of basically, bottom line, a kind of sex trafficking.
Yes.
They are on tape or whatever we're
Mm.
calling this day. They are on video. They actually, talked about openly, we pimp girls,
Mhm.
describing body types they like, flying
Mhm.
women and minors, okay, over state lines, countries. Okay, it's sex
Mm.
trafficking. That is the definition.
That's what
If
it
there's some,
is.
that's why I'm always like, got to go where the minors is. That is what'll stick in all these cases because they're so
Mm.
complex, right? If
Mm.
somebody's over 18, right? Because it's always about the victim willingly went. I can't tell you. I hear that 100 times a day.
Of
So
course you do.
that's always victim blaming. That story is the same old thing. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But they basically all of a sudden they have dual citizenship. They were hiding out in Romania. They had all kinds of charges against them there.
Mm.
I don't know why our government stepped in somehow and brought them back here. Now,
Mm.
Governor Ron DeSantis, they were flown into Florida yesterday, said they are not welcome here. We don't want them here. We have lawsuits going on right now with the National
Mm.
Center on Sexual Exploitation in DC with a US victim.
Wow.
I don't understand because we've seen, unlike Diddy, right? We never saw
Mm.
any actual video, unless
Right.
you have. I've never seen any actual
Just that
video.
Cassie Ventura in the hallway.
That
That's the only one.
that's the only one. There is
Mhm.
video with the Tate brothers, and they
Mm.
were brought back, and they said, "Well, we'll go back to Romania. We'll fly back. We promise." I'm bottom lining it a little bit because this is it goes on
It's a
and
lot of
on.
twists and turns.
But they have to appear for to go to court. They're never going back to Romania to appear for
No.
sex trafficking charges.
No.
The UK doesn't want them to come. They have charges pending in the UK. I
Mm.
don't understand. I mean, it's such a slap in the face to victims. All right, because
Mhm.
we've been talking about it before they've even been charged. They were on podcasts laughing about this, American podcasts.
I
And
know.
and victims
Bragging.
victims would say, and women would say in general, what's going on here, and
Mm.
it's a hard thing to explain, but now they're brought back to the United States. So I don't even know what to say about this one except that
Mhm.
we have to dig deeper into this one. They have to be held accountable. It seems like you and me are always talking about these predators. So fill us in a little bit. See, we don't think like these predators, Dr. Bethany. It's hard.
No.
Tell us what their minds are like.
Well, they're sociopathic, first of all. I know that that term gets tossed around all the time, but let me tell you a little bit about sociopathy. It's a spectrum disorder. So if you see a spectrum, and at the mild end, you have narcissism, then you have antisocial, then you have sociopath, then you have psychopath. They all have the exact same symptoms in varying degrees of severity. So the narcissist may be entitled, lacks empathy, self-aggrandizing, wants reward without achievement. We kind of know all of those characteristics. When you get to antisocial, you get lying, conning, manipulativeness, failure to pay back debts to society. Then when you get to sociopath, you have the addition of more like a parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioral controls, but relating to others on the basis of power rather than affection. That's really where it is. That's a sweet spot, I think, with these guys, because the sexual offending is not just sexual or about rape. Right. It is having power over the victim. It is owning the victim. It's being sadistic with the victim. And if you think of P. Diddy and the Tate brothers, these particular men operate their schemes like cults. It has all the same characteristics of a cult. So if you think of a cult, you think of P. Diddy, it's very similar, where you have one strong cult leader. The cult threatens anybody who tries to leave. The cult promises their followers all these big rewards, like I'll get you a recording contract. But all cults are basically sex cults. I don't know if your listeners or your audience knows that, but there are very few cults that are just cults because somebody has a belief system. The belief system is an overlay on preparing an environment to sexually predate on the more vulnerable members of that society. So it does go on all the time. And I think regarding the Tate brothers, I always think in cases like this, whoever's bringing them back, whoever's giving them a pass, is somebody that I would call offender identified, meaning it will be another, most likely a man, maybe a woman, who is an offender themselves, even if they're in law enforcement or something like that. So they're actually paving the way for the offender to get back out again.
Well, we'll be following up on this because it's a little bit hard today to get information about the Tate brothers, except the United States government was involved. Does not make me very happy. And a lot of our, women and girls are looking at this and like, this is why they do not come forward, right? They feel like they can't fight, the big wheels, so to speak. So we have to keep an eye on that. But let me ask you, why do you think it is so hard? Because we're constantly raising, awareness, we're talking, we're educating. Why these, I'll just use an example, young men and young women, for instance, would fly in and be part of this white parties or freak off parties or anything, the Tate brothers offered, because there's really no free ride. I always try to point that out. You may think because you're getting a new dress or a new suit, or you may think maybe you're stuck in some horrible town, I don't know, somewhere, nothing going on. You think this is so glamorous, and it appears to be. Why won't people wake up? I have a very hard time getting them to wake up. I know people want to be near glamour, what they think is glamour, showbiz, all of that, but they cannot. This is so dangerous.
I think because the exploitation begins in the context of an interpersonal relationship. We can't forget that. So back in the day, I used to live in Brentwood in my 20s and 30s, and there was this rumor mill, and I know it was really happening, of very wealthy men coming from the Middle East or sending their henchmen to go find young women in clubs. And they would say, if you go to this party, we will give you a bag full of jewelry. And so then what the women were talking about, and I heard this in my practice, is, oh, my friend went there and all she had to do was just hang out at a party one night and The next day, she had a bag full of jewelry thrown on her bed, and then they brought her back to the States. And it was always a very sanitized version. And what was left out of the story was someone met that woman in a club, somebody befriended her.
Yes.
Somebody made her feel important, that she would have more of an idealized life. She was offended against, traumatized. Now she's coming back to the United States and presenting it as more sanitized than it really was, because it feels shameful to admit to what's really has happened.
Interesting. Well, we will continue raising the awareness and educating everybody. There's no free ride. That's what I think.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Interesting. And also, we have so many women. People traditionally think, it's a man, a pimp, a trafficker, an abuser. I have to tell you, Dr. Bethany, just in the last 2 years, we are finding out more women are stepping up to assist really a man behind the scenes most of the time, because that woman can act as, the sister, the mother figure,
yes,
and reel them in and make them, as you pointed out, feel important. We are seeing so many women. I can't put my head, on my pillow at night thinking about how can a woman do this to a girl or anybody, another woman. It is horrific, but a real escalation in women doing this predation, which I find completely, it's all shocking, but I find that completely shocking. I saw something interesting just this morning on television, on a news program, and it was AI, something like AI and therapists. Give us artificial intelligence, and I'm sure you've heard about all this. Now, I don't pretend to think, I don't think it's a good idea, but I want to hear from you, because a lot of the work we're doing at the Warriors in Washington, D.C. is we're in a think tank for AI. Oh, yes. We're going all in on this.
Amazing.
Yeah, we do a lot of legislative work in Washington.
Okay.
And that's our focus, because this artificial intelligence, we already have, which the media doesn't cover, so many stories of kids creating their own bots and getting into relationships with bots, and the bots take them over. I know that sounds crazy, but this is actually happening. We have stories of the bots eventually directing the child, go kill your parents.
Yes.
We have all these things happening, and the stories are starting to leak out. But when I saw this headline today, and I did not hear it because I had the sound turned down, I looked up all of a sudden and saw in the Chiron, about AI therapists. What are you hearing about that, and what are your thoughts on that?
Lynn, I have not really heard that much about that. I think because I'm more in an academic community, and that's something that I think we need to have further study and research on. But I will say that we human beings have the capacity to fall in love, idealize, and attach in really remarkable ways. Think about that was part of our evolutionary biological heritage too. If you attach, you survive. If you're in a group, you survive. So the desire to attach, even if you imagine it's a person that's communicating with you, but it's just a bot, even when you find out it's a bot, the attachment is still there. It doesn't wane. I've had a number of women in my practice who have been financially scammed, and it was very clear they were being catfished, and the person that they were relating to was not the real person. It was just a picture of some celebrity or some other person, but they felt just as attached when they found out that they had been catfished. They went through a whole grief process, disconnecting from the fantasy or the illusion of the person they thought they were in love with.
Yes, there was just that story about the woman with Brad Pitt. She sent him close to $1 million, 800 something thousand, because she was receiving pictures. He was in a hospital bed, and Angelina stole all his money or the divorce. And that was what she said. And he needed money, and they had this online relationship, and she kept sending him these big chunks of money. It's astounding. The AI, well, I'm going to point out, it's dangerous, because I'm always, where does that information come from that's being given out? Right.
Good point.
Right. Where is it coming from? I don't think, I'm just going to say it's a good idea. People need people, especially for these issues of, mental health. We have children, we have a well-documented youth mental health crisis in the United States. Give us some thoughts on children. And again, when I say children, I always mean like 30 and under. What do you want to share? What have you discovered that's different now from even a couple of years ago with the way they're thinking or what they're going through?
Well, I see two large areas that are disturbing to me. One is poor concentration. We
Mhm.
have such a proliferation of ADD and ADHD, especially we see in academic settings and school settings. And when you're watching an image that flips from screen to screen to screen to screen, you don't have to focus across time, like by reading a book or reading through an entire chapter and your brain stays focused. That's why there's a lot of neurofeedback and biofeedback now where you look at a screen with bouncing balls and you have something around your head and it monitors whether or not you are focusing on the bouncing balls. And kids sometimes can only focus for like 10 seconds and then, their attention goes away. The other is a disruption in attachment systems. A looking at a screen, even if a person is there, it's not really an attachment system. I mean, maybe like you and I, we're Zooming right now. We have a relationship. We know each other. But a lot of these preoccupation with screens are to kind of avoid attachments in the real world. A lot of
It's
these are
Nancy
to
Grace. She's looking for you, Nancy Grace.
exactly. I was like,
she can't have you until I'm done with you. But
it's to avoid attachments in the real world. And
yeah.
let's face it, attachments are painful. You have to work through a lot to be in a relationship. And so if you can avoid it, dive into a screen somewhere.
Well, listen, we know because we have all these studies that
Let me turn this off.
that Nancy's sure persistent.
That Nancy is sure.
I know. Well, we know we have true internet addictions for children. That is a true for all people,
Yes.
but for children. We work with a lot of teachers across the country and kids can't track. So that goes to the reading. They're so used to swiping. We call it the swipe, swipe, swipe. They don't like something, swipe. They don't think about things. There's no critical thinking, analyzing.
No,
It's a constant filling that need. It's an addiction. So we have that. The good news is though, two things. We have a lot of programs happening in schools and school districts across the country because there's no law about this. Phone-free classrooms.
That's
So
great.
getting the phones go into these pouches or you check them at the door. And interestingly enough, where we're doing it, and this is across the country, the kids like it eventually because the teachers can teach, the kids can focus, the kids are talking to each other. It's the parents carrying on saying, I need to be in constant contact. I need,
That's right.
What if we have a school shooting or something? They're the ones giving the whole program and the schools a lot of pressure. So we're dealing with parents now on the issue, believe it or not the kids.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And the other
That is interesting.
right? They're just so in fear of not being in constant contact. So that's another program. We'll talk about that. But also the alpha generation. This is born 2010 until now. So, 0 to 14, 15. They are rejecting. They want to read actual books. They are asking about like relationships. We do a lot of work with family entertainment and studies. They want family programs because everything's so sexualized. So I'm saying that's all good news. That's a lot of hope right there that we can continue that type of thing. Have you heard anything about any of that?
Well, yes. I mean, primarily children want to be a part of a family and they want to be loved. I mean, it's just that they adore their parents. If they have a good family, they want to be sitting around the dinner table. They want to be connected. There was a big Catholic study many years ago that had many participants or subjects, and they determined that families who have dinner every night all together, that there was a dramatic reduction in teen pregnancy, drug use, and mental disorders. There was an increase in intelligence and earnings across the lifespan. So that time with family rather than a screen or all being disjointed had really a remarkable impact. So I think if you recognize that children want to be connected to their parents, then you as a parent could have the bravery to help them not be addicted to a screen because they really don't want that after all. They want you.
Exactly. I like that. People just want to be loved. Kids want to be loved. People want to be loved. Everybody wants to be loved. That's something. It's funny you said that because when we talk to the parents, we're like, no devices in the bedrooms at night. And sit at the kitchen table and have a meal, or the dining room table and have a meal,
Mm-hmm.
and show by example. Just you also put down your device for a few minutes. Start with 15 minutes a day. That's it, just 15,
Mm-hmm.
and go from there. Give us some. Let me ask you something. How do you take care of yourself? You're absorbing all of these energies and stories and thoughts from other people, and I'm sure some of this, people are going through so many things. It To me, it's very traumatizing. I will use that word. How do you take care of Dr. Bethany?
What I find helpful is that no matter what somebody's telling me, I still retain my capacity to think. Okay. No one can take that away from me. Sexual abuse victims, the perpetrators try to rob them of their critical thinking, their sense of self. But if I'm sitting with a patient who, let's say, is in love with somebody who's exploiting them, they will try to convince me sometimes that this is appropriate and this is okay. But I try not to be seduced. I try to say, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. I can still think whatever I want to think. And maybe that's applicable to your victims, that if they have any little thought that something's not right, if they don't want to go along with another person, if something seems, they have that gut check that something's not right, their minds are sound. They have to go along with what they're thinking. Those fertile whispers inside are very, very important.
That's great advice, because I can't tell you how many people have told me over the years, I had a feeling that it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right. I still did it, kind of thing.
That's right.
And always, I can't tell you, lots of people who don't even know each other. That's great advice. And also, I want to remind everybody, stay in the now going forward. That's a very tough thing. We work with a lot of victims, and we really try to, like, you're doing great now going forward. Let that go. That's another program, I know, but
I like that idea, stay in the now, which is what I was talking about earlier, that the brain keeps predicting that it's about to happen, whereas in fact it did happen in the past. That doesn't mean it's happening now. So to stay, is that what you're talking about?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
because it's so we work with so many women and girls, and some men and boys, and they're just really so stuck. And
Mm,
rightfully, I understand it,
mm,
but they just need sometimes, like a hand on the shoulder, like, okay, let's focus on now, like how you're doing
mhm.
great now. Like, don't let anybody live in your brain rent free. That's what I say. Don't let
I
them live there
love
rent.
that.
Don't let them live rent free. Are you kidding?
That's
Ooh,
right.
push them out. Um, okay, I want to ask you. I could talk to you all day long, so please promise me you will be coming back,
I
because
would love to.
there are so many issues to cover,
Mhm,
especially what people are thinking, what you're hearing. Certainly, all these cases, we want to educate everybody. And we
mm,
really, again, want them to know there is help and there are voices out there to reach out to. Give us some final thoughts on
mm,
anything you want. Let's see, let's focus right now on parents. I believe
mm,
parents, because they tell me they're very overwhelmed today. They're very
mm,
busy trying to pay bills, rent, car payments, take care of kids,
mm,
schools. They're very overwhelmed. Therefore, they do nothing. They'll shut the door, so to speak,
mm.
and not watch what the kids are doing. They'll give them
That's
a
right.
device, they'll give them the phone or the iPad, because the kids are quiet, almost like a babysitting tool. Again, we're not judging, and you have parental
Mhm,
autonomy. You can do what you want with your child. We're always like, delay is the way with devices. No child needs a phone before eighth grade. But
mm.
what would you, since you're an expert, what would you suggest to parents or caretakers about any of this? Because the internet is not going away. We're not giving it
Mhm,
back. You and me are talking, 3,000
mhm,
miles or so apart. We love it, right?
mhm, mhm,
But we need some guardrails, and we need to wake up and talk about the kids. And if you give a
mm.
phone or an iPad, you have some responsibilities. But what do you want to say to parents directly?
Well, there's so much information about that. One is that, screens should not be in bedrooms. I know you mentioned that earlier, but for a lot of parents, leave the phone in the bedroom and then they imagine the child's not going to go on. So you have to dispossess yourself of that notion. Um, if a child is going onto the internet, it should be in a living room or a public area of the house with the screen faced towards other people. That there shouldn't be an expectation of privacy for young people on the internet. There can be, if you vetted a friend and the other mother brings a friend over for a play date and you really know the family, that's one thing, but you really don't know all these people that your child is interacting with on the internet. The other thing is that there's that one moment where you're taking your child away from the screen where they don't know how to transition. That's what I see in my practice. They scream, they cry, they want to go back on again, and the parent gets overwhelmed and gives in. And they have to know that if they can stay with the child for that first 10 or 15 minutes while they reorient to the world of reality, the child's going to be okay. But that critical witching hour is important to try to navigate.
Yeah, we have a lot of stories of, including the teenagers and little kids, they'll scream for about a week. If the parents really can stick to it that long, like take or giving them, I know, because it's hard for them. But so we preach to them. I use the word preach because I really believe that's what we do at the Warriors.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, wherever, first of all, wherever the children are, so are the predators. That's
absolutely, of course,
and,
of course.
Handing a phone, any device, is like opening your front door to the world, saying, "Come on in."
That's it.
But we lock our front doors at night, so we use that analogy.
That's
but also, we know from our work in the last few years, if they can make it about a week with the screaming and all that, the kids calm down. And when the mother says, "Okay, here's a book," so instead of the phone, you're going to have a book for an hour. I don't want the book. Okay, sit there and do nothing and be bored. Parents have to get tough about this because we know that the phones are robbing.
Yes,
and
they
the
are.
Chromebooks and the laptops, and we have to all be partners in it. We call it partnerships. Like, we want family partnerships. If you bought that phone, you pay for the internet routers. Did you know, Dr. Bethany, there are routers? I don't want to get technical now. You can cut off the router to your child's phone, like at night, and keep your router on. There's all kinds of little tricks and things.
So many controls now.
Right. And people just have to know a lot of free resources. We always have them in the Warriors. And we always need you, Dr. Bethany, and your voice to share, because you're so calm. I get very worked up about a lot of things. To talk
well, you're
about
exposed to a lot.
But you know what? It's good because we're talking about it. Like, that's where it starts. Like, we talk about it. Intervention, prevention, questions, kind of thing. I guess I'll let you go. I don't want to, but I will let you
promise me that you will invite me back on the show.
Oh, absolutely, because I have a lot of we can focus on a certain subject, kind of thing. Something we're working on the AI at the Warriors, but the other thing is
amazing.
Boys and men are the fastest growing demo for human trafficking in the United States.
I'm not surprised.
Boys and men, and nobody is really talking about it. We want to bring the boys to the table, the young men and men to the table, get over the embarrassment. Those are the studies. Like, this is it. Let us talk about that. Let them also, we want to bring them to the table to support women, the voices, to support, like, I'm trying to build out, because traditionally we think of girls and women. No, it's everybody now. So I'd like to talk to you about that. We've got the problems with teen boys with sextortion. And they're being targeted from middle class to wealthier neighborhoods because the criminals believe those are the ones who the kids will have the money to send them with the images. So we got to keep talking about that, because when I talk about it, parents are in denial. They're like, my kid would never do that. They're doing it. So we have
but they would.
Yeah. We have a lot of things to talk about. It is drbethanymarshall.com is the website. You are all going to follow her on X and Facebook. She's on YouTube, Instagram. We'll have it all in the body of the video. You are, Dr. Bethany Marshall, such a warrior. I am so happy you joined me today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Please let us speak again soon.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Bye.